2 in Roblox Studio. Well, last time we've been having a look at how you can create player plots like those, with players getting assigned to it once they join, and the entire thing essentially cleaning up once they leave again. So I guess the most important part for us will now be to make sure people can actually plant crops on their plots. So I guess let's switch right over to Roblox Studio again. So here inside Roblox Studio, this is essentially the experience we've been creating over the last couple of episodes, and as always I will be linking the entire playlist up here for you. But essentially all we've done so far is create this simple map. This is our existing plot script, assigning those players at the very start, which we do in here, and then cleaning things up, which we do below here, whenever they leave again. And not sure if you noticed, but Grow Garden 2 and also the original has those gray boxes at the bottom. Those items the player has in their backpack. The good thing is we actually don't even need to create this from scratch, because it is very adjacent to a built-in feature of Roblox, being tools. So whenever we add a new tool to the player's backpack, like in here, like so, you can see it show up below here. Now it doesn't have those round edges, but this won't necessarily make me cry now, so I guess for the start that will be alright. We can add those at runtime via script, but Roblox also actually has this starter pack folder here, and all the tools we put in here will essentially be copy-pasted to the player's backpack once they spawn or even respawn, which will be quite handy if you ask me, since people will respawn. Players will be able to kill each other in order to retrieve their stolen items. So let's say in order to handle planting, we want players to be able to select their item like in the original. So let's just add, as an example, a new tool here, call it carrot seed for instance. If you plan to have multiple seeds, you can also add a dedicated ID as an attribute for instance, or like to tell whether this item is even meant to be planted for instance. For now let's keep it like this. For instance, you can also disable can be dropped. So whenever people press, I think, return, they won't be able to drop it. It's also disable requires handle, for example, so it won't despawn or anything, even though it doesn't have any visuals to it. But if you would like to add some, you can do so via parts, or adding those, dragging in toolbox assets. And then, but you need to make sure they aren't anchored, and for instance use walls in order to attach them. I might have a look at this in a future episode. So when I test this thing, you can see the item popping up below here, and I can also select it, even though again the player character won't display this tool idle animation, I guess, because it doesn't have a handle to it. And maybe another interesting realization for you though, whenever selecting a tool, it will actually appear below the player character, as you can tell here, meaning it will disappear from the backpack. So if you would like to, for instance, iterate over all of your items, like when saying sell all the crops, we will actually have to keep track of this by treating this object below here, in case it exists, separately, or unequipping all tools before iterating over them, just to keep in mind. But now how can we detect whether the player is clicking left, for instance, if you're on desktop, and actually plant this seed? I guess I got great news for you again. Those tools also have a built-in way of doing this. So for instance, you can add a new server script to this tool, but in order to keep it simple, you can also add a new client script to start a character scripts, like this, which are run every time the character spawns or respawns, as opposed to starter player scripts, which are only run once. And in here we can use the player service. So I guess you can kind of think of this as a dedicated subsystem in order to access the local player, as long as we're inside a local script, and then get access to the player character, like the actual figurine, like a humanoid model. So let's do a quick print here for testing. There you go, awesome. And now if we want to get access to this object, we will need to find a way to get notified about this happening. So a new child element being added to the character, and then for example do additional checks like whether it is a tool, and perhaps in your case also whether it has a seed tag assigned to it, or a plant ID attribute or whatever. So we can do it. We execute what's inside those parentheses whenever a child object, like inside the hierarchy, is added to the character. Now this is why it says why we put this event here. This always looks kind of messy, but we essentially define a function inline here. This is what they say. So instead of putting something like this up here and then just running test in here, since we only need to have this once, we insert it right in here. So those are our quote-unquote security checks then. You can also remove this for now. If it is a tool, so we kind of filter out the limbs, for instance, the character's limbs, then we connect to this very activate event, which is exactly the thing triggering when we use the left mouse button, for instance, and hold this tool. So I guess let's use another print here for testing with an empty message, but we will still be able to view this timestamp. And alright, good. And by the way, just so you know, if you would like to have those visual objects assigned to your tools, like I do in my premium Grow Garden 2 like framework, you can find in the description. This is how you can do it then. So you have those like models or simple parts below your tool, and then you use those welds in order to weld them together, like attach them, without having to set anchor to true, so they don't kind of get your character stuck. There are also plugins for this to do this very easily. We might be looking deeper into this in a future episode, but instead of just printing, we will have to notify the server about us, wanting to plant a new seed. So it can then, like for your final game, this is just for education, but in your final game, it can perform some security checks, like whether the position is actually valid, and we got enough seeds inside our inventory in the first place, and so on. So how do we notify the server and kind of obtain this clicked position in the first place? Let's have a look. So we need to get access to the mouse. Another reason why we use a local script, get access to the plots folder, like this one in my case. I will be linking the respective episode again if you want to dig deeper into this. And then for the sake of this tutorial, an easy way to make sure the server has enough time to assign a plot is to just wait for 1 second, for instance, get access to the respective plot. Because, we kind of say, for instance, a plot's name like 1, below the player as an attribute, and then we get access to this folder's child with having the respective name. But on the interesting part, we emit an array, like an invisible, like purely mathematical object, starting from our camera and going into the direction our mouse is for 1000 stats. You can also decrease this distance if you like. And then we find out if there's anything we intersect with. And then we can also set additional parameters like us wanting to only intersect with objects included in our whitelist, or include list I guess it's called now. The only allowed object being the player's own plot's floor, which is just this type of floor object here in my case. And then we can get the result, like whether anything has been hit, like this. For instance here, we don't intersect with anything. That is if I hold the tool, of course. So it says no, an empty object. But once I click here, you can see this, whatever this means, but at least some sort of data structure, including various components, like the position, which we can now extract. And this is how we do it essentially. We extract the position, like its absolute word position. There's still one caveat though. For instance, if this is 1-1, and next time I'm getting assigned to this plot, the plant's position will still be 1-1, meaning my plants will essentially overlap with another player's plants, so we will have to use their relative position. So for instance, the offset, they have to this floor object, so this is why we get access to the floor object in here to calculate its relative position. Like this, things like those you can look those up online. You will know them eventually, know them by heart at some point, or ask AI or whatever. There's this. I feel like the longer I work in this industry, the less it matters like what you know, as long as you know where to find it. I guess. Let's print this again for testing. So this time around, no print at all when I do this, which is correct, because then this thing essentially is filtering us out. But once I click here, you can see the relative C frame, those 3 numbers at the start being the relative X, Y, and Z. Awesome. So now we just need to notify the server. The way we can do this is by using a so-called remote event, for instance. We can add those like this, give them an appropriate name, like create a plant or whatever, it's a replicated storage. And those type of signals, if you will, are used for client to server and server to client signals, but they can't directly return a value. So if you want to send some information back, you will have to use a second one essentially, or call this like the other way around. So now we can get access to it like this, access replicated storage, like being this folder, or I think model strictly speaking, and then get access to the event itself with RE referring to remote event, or kind of my, I guess, best practice notation. Now below here we can call it, so sound the alarm I think I used as a metaphor in the respective Grow Garden 1 tutorial, which the server can then react to, and also transmit the tool, like this thing, in case it contains any further information we want to use, like what type of seed for instance, and the relative C frame. And when firing server events from the client, there's also always an invisible, like as if you would do a player in here, which we won't have to do manually, just to keep it in mind. And inside our server script, like this simple script I was showing you earlier, I go more into detail on in the last episode, we can get access to it the same way, do this, do that, and then we can react to the signal being emitted like this, like remote event, the interesting event being called on server event, and then we connect any function to it. We define inline right away again. And keep in mind, this time it's again 3 arguments of the player being transmitted automatically. So let's test this real quick. There you can see it. And this time it says server and it's also green, like instead of blue I think, and emitted from the plot script, line 37 to be precise. Awesome. And now in here we can essentially like duplicate, like in case we're using a template for when it comes to the model, we can duplicate it or clone it and then parent it to the respective plot. If you would like to keep it clean and move it to the correct position, the relative C frame we're transmitting with I think C frame referring to coordinate frame. So similar to transform I guess in Unity, also just a holder or container I guess for the position and orientation, like it is in here. So let's open up the toolbox up here. In the top nav bar you can go to this respective tab like this, and let's filter for 3D assets and look up, let's say caret for instance. Like first let's focus on one-time harvest, and this one by Cobalt Nest is the one I've been using so far. Let's drag it in here like this. Make sure all of its parts or in general descendants are anchored. You can do in here. We can also set its primary part to, for instance, humanoid root part. So the entire model is using its C frame as a reference. And when we say like this model and then colon pivot 2, it will essentially move this primary part, whatever like one we set in here, and restore the other parts like relative positions and orientations. So, but we don't want to have this thing sitting inside the workspace all the time, we just want to use it as a template. So I guess for instance that drag it right in here, replicated storage, and I guess we can keep its name like this for now. And again, the reason why we set anchor to true is to prevent its descendants from falling apart essentially. And let's also create a parent for the plants for each of our plots. You can do this manually quite easily, like by selecting all of those, holding shift, and then once you click plus, actually the other way around, let's create a new folder, like below the first one for instance. Let's rename it to plants, and then we can copy it by holding Ctrl and C, or I guess right click and use copy, and then we can easily select all of the rest and go with Ctrl Shift and V, and there you go. Isn't this awesome? Yeah, and this is essentially paste into, but obviously you can also use the command line for this. But down here we get access to the player plot again using the attribute, like where we store the plot's name, get access to this folder, so we can parent the new caret or the new plant to it, and we create a new plant using, like by accessing the respective children of replicated storage. Again, if you use multiple ones, you might want to kind of distinguish here or branch like your code, so we get access to it, and we need to make sure to clone it. So we duplicate this, move it below here, and then like place it at the right correction, so we get access to the floor again. And this time we do it the other way around. We convert it back to a word space, like the relative C frame relative to the floor. Let's have a look. There you go. Awesome. And because I just noticed, if you're having the same issue with your player character playing Danny Phantom, I guess you can essentially select all of those descendants and enable can collide, like so. If you're having a lot of those, or like you don't even know how many, you can also do it like this, where this needs to refer to your respective model or part or whatever. So get descendants would mean like perform this action for all of its descendants, like not only its direct children but also its kind of nested children. And if the current children has a can collide attribute that is a part or base part, mesh part, whatever, set it to true like this, just so you know. And if it helps, I will also be uploading this entire like Roblox place, like RBXL file, and link it for download below in the description for you. However, I would still encourage you to watch these kind of videos in order to understand the concepts, and also if you don't do it, chances are you will get stuck at some point. So I guess feel free to just skip through those and to deep dive into the respective sections you plan to change or you're struggling with. Oh, and one more important thing I noticed during the editing: if we set this to server and clients and go with one client, for instance, this is just an internal warning, but now you can see when I plant a couple of carrots or whatever plant you got, and I decide to leave the game, it won't clean up. So I guess the next player will be kind of happy or unhappy depending on how you look at it. So let's have a look at this real quick as well. So this again is the function we execute whenever a player is leaving, where we get access to its plot like we did in the previous episode. Reset some attributes and reset the syntax. And here we can also go through all of its like plant objects and destroy them. So this is how you do it then, essentially. You can also use wait for tile to whatever your preference is, though I don't really assume there will be any issues when it comes to like asynchronous loading here. But make sure to replace objects with plants. So let's give it another try real quick. Okay. Perfect. What happens when we add a new one? Like so. There you go. Well, it's still the original plot, although it says player 2's plot here, which is correct. It looks clean to me. And with that, let's merge the timelines again and go back to original Jaden. There you have it. This is how you can create this planting new objects type of mechanic inside Roblox Studio. And next time we will be having a look at how you can create this kind of growing animation you just saw. I don't really want to put too much stuff into one single video like I used to. And if we find the time, we can also add those tools, like the ones you can see in my premium framework. Anyway, feel free to reach out if you have any questions, and I'll see you then.